The reason we use that center hook is for weight distribution. They control the M134 minigun, and they are also responsible for the left-hand side of the airframe. So, DTT. So the aim for this lesson is for 4IB personnel to know and understand the various aircrew roles within number 18 and 27 squadrons. So those are the Chinook squadrons. So this course should last about an hour and a half if things go well, probably a little shorter if we get through things nice and quick and you don't ask too many complex questions. Okay, so we're going to cover a couple different objectives this evening. We're going to start off with our aircrew roles, so the different positions in the airframe, what they're responsible for. We're then going to go through aircrew procedures, so different procedures for positions, mainly in the back of the Chinook. So it's going to be mainly procedures for the load master. We're then going to cover some basic logistics, covering the use of crates, as we have over yonder, how we do some basic sling loading, as well as how we operate the wonderful KP crate filler. And then finally, we're going to finish off with some aircraft servicing. So we're going to be doing some rearming, refueling, and repairing. Right, what we'll do, we'll have a wander around the Chinook and I'll go through the different positions on the airframe. So stand up for me and we'll have a wander over to the big girl. Right, so we'll start at the front. So this is obviously where the pilot and co-pilot sits. On the front right, the closest to us here, that will be where the pilot sits. So they would normally be the flight lead. They're in charge of the airframe. So they focus on the flying and safety of the airframe at all times, and they also communicate with the other pilots. At the end of the day, they make the big decisions, and it is their responsibility to look after what the bird does and everything inside it and the crew. Then we go to the front left. That'll be where the co-pilot sits. They are then the 2IC of the airframe. They look after navigation, and also communication with ground call signs, whether that be AWHQ or sometimes TMW. They are hopefully fully trained in flying an airframe, and if needed, they can pilot the airframe from their seat. We also have a wonderful camera on a gimbal, which gives us a bit of extra information, whether that be for reconnaissance. And when I mean reconnaissance, I mean looking at an HLS and going, is that viable and is there any obstacles? That's pretty much it. We'll then go on to the WISOP. This is normally the most junior member of the crew. They control the M134 minigun, and they are also responsible for the left-hand side of the airframe. They will fire that minigun when the airframe is under immediate threat or when given clearance by the pilot or co-pilot. Finally, we'll come to the rear. So this is the loadmaster / crew chief position. They man the GPMG. and are responsible for the back of the bird. So they look after the cargo, whether that be people's casualties or could be vehicles, could be crates, whatever it might be. Whatever we're moving, they look after that. So they're responsible for the overall loading and unloading of all cargo and personnel. They're responsible for the rear of the airframe, and they manage communications with TMW concerning casualties needing extraction and also the reinsertion of packs to their platoons. Those are our 4 positions in the airframe that we man. Any questions about those?
All good.
Lovely. So that is pretty much aircrew roles. Nice and simple. So we've got our 4 positions. Pilot, co-pilot, loadmaster, crew chief, which is combined, and the WISOP. And they've each got their responsibilities. Let's go have a sit down again for that. There's a bit more short section of theory to go through. Lovely. So, as a member of the aircrew, or as passengers or casualties, you will need to know what to do or what is going on during various stages of flight. The stages of flight are as follows: pre-flight, ground operations, infantry, loading and unloading procedures, and then takeoff and landing. As a infantryman, you've only really got to worry about the infantry loading and unloading in terms of what have you got to do if you're a PAX, where have you got to go, who are you listening to, what's going on. However, as a member of aircrew, we've got to cover all those stages. So we'll start with pre-flight. Our pre-flights are the list of pre-flight checks made by the crew, usually at the start of an op night or training flight. For the pilot and co-pilot, I'll just cover those briefly. But what they do, they get on the airframe, make sure they're connected to crew intercom. They check for any damage in terms of avionics and anything that they can see in their systems. They check the fuel, make sure we've got enough fuel for our operations. They configure their racks if they need to, and then they turn on their HUD along with their radar and GPS. That's pretty much a pre-flight check for the pilot and co-pilot. Pretty simple. For the crew, it's a little bit more in depth. So first things, so it'll be the loadmaster and the WISOP. They'll have a wander around the airframe. They'll check for the external appearance of the airframe for any visual damage. Make sure there's nothing wrong with it. Make sure it all looks okay. Then they go ahead and board the airframe. They sort out their intercom so that they're on crew. They then check the ammunition of their weapon systems. If you're in the loadmaster seat, you then move the ramp to level. That's the position it is in now. So we have 3 positions. Closed, which is fully up. A level, which is how we operate normally. And then fully open, which means we can then get vehicles in the back, for example. So when we're operating, we only run in the level position. And then finally, they configure the back of the airframe for whatever tasking they're going to be set. So the back of the airframe has 3 different configurations. Transit, as it is in now. So that's with the normal seats folded down. We can fit about a platoon's worth of people in there. We then have cargo, which is the seats folded up. and that's so that we have as much space in the back of the airframe for as much cargo as we can fit in. And then finally, we also can unfold the stretchers, which are currently sitting underneath those seats. So we can unfold the stretchers when we're, and that'll be our MERT configuration or Kazovac. Any questions about pre-flight checks? Lovely. So next we'll cover ground operations. So once pre-flights are complete, the airframe is ready for operation and ready for use. So therefore we have a couple different bits that we do, which depends on our tasking. So if we're going straight out for tasking, we might do some taxiing. So the airframe might be required to move from its current location. This is achieved by taxiing from point A to point B. When taxiing, the aircrew must use the following. So our first point is teamwork. The whole aircrew must work together to ensure safety all around. Spatial awareness, being aware of the space needed for the airframe to move. And finally, callouts. Aircrew alerting the pilot of any potential hazards, proximity to any objects, and distance to areas like landing pads, rearm, repair, and refuel areas. So when we're taxiing, as per those points, we need to work as a team to make sure that we taxi safely. Because of the size of the airframe, it can get it's not unruly. Unruly would be the wrong word to say. It is large, and it needs cooperation from everyone to make sure that we're not hitting anything. It's 99 foot long. It's 30 foot wide. It's not small. We need a lot of space to taxi that airframe, making sure that there aren't any obstacles, anything that we're going to collide with, anything that the rotors might collide with, so lamp posts, teleport poles, stuff like that, stuff that you don't want to hit. So, taxiing as a crew, working together pretty much, and making sure that we call things out clearly. Okay, and then the other bit is loading and service. Service. Depending on tasking, the airframe will either be required to be loaded with cargo or with passengers. It could also require servicing after it has been used. This can include refueling, rearming, and repair if it has sustained any damage. When loading or servicing, the following will happen. The loadmaster will supervise all loading and unloading of cargo and passengers. They will inform the pilots via crew radio on numbers of passengers or the total cargo loaded and or unloaded, and then possible location of delivery or collections. Then finally, aircrew. The whole aircrew will assist with the servicing of the airframe. Communication must be used due to vehicle movement around the airframe. So when we're moving when we're moving vehicles around an airframe, we need to inform the pilot of your intentions. So let's say I wanted to bring up the refuel truck to the Chinook. I need to ask the pilot whether I'm clear to approach the airframe. Once he gives me clearance, then I know I can approach the airframe and start the refueling process. The reason for me needing to ask for clearance, for example, we could be doing a hot refuel and the pilot might want to move the airframe slightly, something. Doesn't matter what it is. We just need to make sure we've got clearance. So now we get the exciting bit of the infantry loading, infantry loading and unloading procedures. So First thing we start off with is the pilot informs the loadmaster to debus and then meet with the infantry. The loadmaster goes ahead and debusses. He then contacts the infantry IC to IC. IC or to IC if he can, otherwise he'll just speak with the reinserts. He then attempts to get details with who there is, as in what section, how many there are, and where they are going. Hopefully they might not know this information, so we can find it out ourselves. Then the loadmaster passes the information to the pilots via the short-range radio, saying, I have this many people from this section, this many from here. The pilot or co-pilot receives the information and then gives clearance for the loadmaster to board those packs. So then the loadmaster speaks to the infantry that are waiting and says to them, follow me. The loadmaster leads the infantry via the safest and most direct route to the airframe without crossing firing arcs on the left-hand side of the airframe. So, just making sure we stay clear of that minigun. All personnel shall approach the aircraft in an orderly fashion and in the crouched position when less than 15 meters away, unless the airframe is fully powered down. On arrival at the aircraft ramp, the loadmaster will crouch to the side of the door, so pretty much in front of that Jimpy, and ensure that all personnel safely embark. They also carry out a head count as the personnel get on board, so they're making sure that however many they got told, they're getting on board, making sure they're not missing anyone. Once all packs are on board, the loadmaster will get on his seat on the rear ramp, and then we'll call out on the crew intercom, last man in, rear clear. So that is an indication to the pilots that it is safe for them to depart. This phrase should only be used once all personnel are safely on board. The loadmaster then switches to PAXCOM. This can be swapped either by the ACE Interact menu, or there's a shortcut of Control and comma. So they switch to the PAX intercom, and they speak to the PAX on board and ask them to switch to the PAX intercom. This prevents the pilots from being disturbed whilst they try to fly the airframe. Very good. So the next step with infantry on board is the mandatory crew chief brief. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's what it is. So, all the infantry should be on the PAX intercom by this point. You might have been on crew, just making sure that the pilots can depart nice and safely, making sure that they're clear of any obstacles. Once we're in flight and on our way to our destination, the crew chief will then swap back onto the PAX intercom and start our crew chief brief. So what we start with is a welcome. We say welcome to on board, and then we give the call sign. So at the moment we only have Vortex call sign, so let's say welcome aboard Vortex 11. We then give information about the HLS. So we are going to this grid for, let's say we're splitting up between two platoons, this grid for this platoon, this grid for that platoon. And we can also give them the order in which we're dropping them off. So give an HLS, give information of the HLS. We also try and give some references to the infantry. So any landmarks that they might know, we try and give that to them. So we're landing just south of this town. You need to move this direction towards to get to friendly forces. So just trying to give a bit of a hand to the infantry, as it can sometimes get a little confusing in the back of the airframe, especially if we're going around in circles for a little bit. We then inform them of the 30 seconds call. So we say, we tell them that when we give them the 30 seconds command, we need them to keep communications to a minimum so that the aircrew can coordinate and land the airframe on the ground nice and safely. And then finally, we've informed them of the actions when they hear the debus command. So when they hear debus, 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 they need to exit the airframe, move away from the rear of the airframe, and perform an ARD. Finally, we just give them any additional extra information. So we might give some information straight away that there's anti-aircraft threat, so that there's a high likelihood that we might be waved off, or whatever it might be. That's the main crew chief brief. Let's say we're later in the flight, we've had to wave off, or they're moving HLSs. We can then chime in, connect to PAXCOM again, and just try and keep the packs updated and make sure they're not, sitting in the back twiddling their thumbs going, why are we flying around in circles for half an hour? Because we don't want to be doing it, and they don't want to be sat there not knowing what's going on. So finally is the debus procedure. About 1 kilometer from our destination, the pilot or co-pilot will call a 30 seconds warning. You will then relay this over the PAX intercom for the guys in the back to hear. So we just call 30 seconds. If they don't shut up, feel free to call it again. It's not an issue. If you need to, you can raise your voice. Just make sure that, we're polite and we keep them quiet. We then go ahead and get in for landing. And let's say we're now safe on deck. The pilot, and only the pilot, will call safe on deck. So that's the pilot saying that we are now safely on the ground, and he's happy that we're staying there, for example. Then the loadmaster will inform the infantry on the PAXCOM to debus, 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 unless there is a request for another boarding. So unless anyone's getting on the airframe, as in we're picking someone up, whether that be casualties or more packs. So unless those two occasions, the loadmaster will stay on the airframe. The infantry will then debus according to their SOPs, as in ARD. And once the last man is clear of the helicopter, the loadmaster will then call last man out, rear clear. So as in, all the packs are off, the rear of the airframe is clear, and then that gives a signal to the pilot that they can then lift safely. Very good. So that's the infantry procedures, how we look after the infantry and what our procedures around that. Finally, we then are going to cover our takeoff and landing procedures. So what are your responsibilities? What do you need to do when we're taking off or landing? So for the loadmaster, it is part of their job to call out the altitude of the airframe when we're landing. So the reason why we get the loadmaster to do it is because they'll be at the lowest point in the airframe when we're coming in for a landing, because we should be nose up. So what we normally do, the loadmaster should start calling about 20, so they'll start with 20. Then they only need to call 15, 10, and then they call 10 through 0. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then they can call rear wheels on deck. So 20, 15, 10, and then 10 all the way down to 0. So this gives a accurate representation of where the rear of the airframe, where the lowest of the airframe is at the moment to the pilot. You will be able to see the altitude in the top left. when you're on the seat. So you don't have to guess it. You can just read exactly what it's displaying. Another responsibility for the loadmaster is checking for rear obstacles. So when we're coming in for a landing, the pilot or co-pilot will call for a rear obstacle, or a last obstacle. So they'll try and pick something obvious, a nice reference point that you can see clearly. They're not just going to pick a tree when we're in a forest. They're going to try and pick something that is distinguishable. We also try and help out when that obstacle comes under the airframe. The pilot or co-pilot will then call coming over last obstacle. So that means they've lost sight of it. It is currently under the airframe, so that when Loadmaster then goes, okay, it's going to be coming past me soon. So that they're ready to call that rear clear when it is. So if we are flying too low, for example, the Loadmaster or any crew can call maintain. Maintain is a command that is drilled into the pilots, and they know if you call maintain, they should not go any lower. If they're still going lower, you can repeat that call. So make sure, stay vocal is what we're saying. When we're coming in for a landing, so just be very vocal on obstacles that need it. So if we're too low, make sure you're calling maintain, and then also pick out any obstacles that could be in the way. So let's say the pilot's trying to get it down, we're drifting around a little bit, drifting left or right. Make sure you call obstacles, tree close left side, whatever. Something clear, decisive, so that the pilot knows, right, I shouldn't go that way. Lovely, so next we'll cover basic logistics. Right, jump up again and we'll go wander over to the crates and container that I have over there. So, the Chinook squadrons currently handle pretty much all logistics for the 4IB. They'll be ranging from pallets, crates, containers, and vehicles. We also deal with vehicle recovery if it is liftable via the Chinook. The Chinook can lift about 11 ton, so sadly we can't lift Mastiffs or Coyotes or the Warrior. But pretty much most of the other things we use in the 4IB, the Chinook can lift. So logistics covers the following. So that can be crates. So we've got there, containers, sling loading them into field. We can also do refueling, rearming, and repairing. So we can provide these services to the infantry, for whatever they need. Extract vehicles out, replace them, refuel them. If requested, we'll get it done if we can. So a big part of what we do, is sling loading. We're going to go through that in a second, but before we do, I'm going to go through how we move crates about, how we move cargo. So, pretty basic. It's just making sure we vocalize our movements, making sure that those around us are aware of what we're doing. So, I've got a couple crates here that we're going to have a go at moving about. So things we need to say. So if you're about to pick the crate up, you just say lifting crate, turning left, moving backwards, moving forwards, turning right, stuff like that. Just saying what you're doing so those around you are aware, because these crates can be dangerous and we don't want any injuries that could be avoidable. So when moving cargo and objects, it can be dangerous. So the following list is the best practice to follow. If we're unloading a crate, we need to make sure that the area around is clear. We don't actually know where the crate is going to spawn. If we're unloading from vehicles, sometimes it can appear in random places around that vehicle. It'll just pop out. Ensure your path is clear. So if you cannot see where you're going, make sure you have a buddy there. Guiding you, helping you out, just to make sure that we can see where we're going, and don't collide with anything. Next, don't place the crate too close to anything. If we're getting too close to things and put things down, sometimes they have a little Arma moment and have a little jig, and we don't want, when we're placing the crate down, to go have a bit of a moment and then damage the airframe. As I said before, crewmen should call out their intentions when moving crates and pallets so as not to cause injury to others. So preparing to lift, lifting, moving left, moving right, etc. Now, as I said a little bit, work in pairs if possible. One to lift the load, the other to act as a spotter and guide the lifter. Right now we'll just do some practice. I want you each to move one of these crates over to the side of the Chinook. You can either work as a pair and act as a mover and a guider or spotter, or you can do it on your own. It's whatever you're comfortable with.
I'll spot for you, Smith.
Oh, we'll do the big one then.
Oh.
Oh, hang on. Lifting. God, I'm strong. There you go. Going left.
Clear left. Clear left. About 5 meters away from the rotors. 2 meters. 1 meter.
Let's bring that down. Bring it all the way down, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We can pretty much drag it right along the floor when we're near that Chinook. It's not an issue if we're down the ground.
Oh.
But let's not use it as whatever his name is in Super Smash Bros. With his hammer.
You finished moving it?
Oh, hang on.
Oh.
Hey. I'm gonna go forward.
Clear forward.
Mm-hmm.
You're about 3 meters away from the rear of the ramp.
That'll do there. That's pretty good. So we've got a bit of a distance between the Chinook and the crate or container. Personally, I'd prefer a little bit more distance, but it's okay for a first go. Because pilots are probably a little wobbly when taking off, so it's better just to be on the safe side and have it probably maybe 1.5 to 2 times further. But yeah, pretty good teamwork there. Just making sure that when we get near the airframe, we're keeping it nice and low, just so that we don't accidentally hit the rotors. And it's also best practice because we could be moving crates when the aircraft is spooled. So next thing is sling loading. So in your kits, you should have a cargo sling. If you've managed to lose it between 7 o'clock and now, there are some extras in that crate over there. The cargo sling is a wonderful piece of equipment and is how we move the majority of our logistics about. So if we have a wander over to the container, we go ahead and interact with it. We'll see an option for rig for sling load. What we're going to do today is use the auto sling. Nice and simple. Very good. You've got the ropes there. And then what we're going to do, we're going to crawl underneath the airframe. I'm going to try and find the center hook. So the front one's about in between the two front wheels. The middle is just in front of that loadmaster hatch. So you might be able to see a slightly different in texture. So just about where you are, that'll be the one. And that looks to be the rear one. That's behind the loadmaster hatch. So there should be one just above us here. So what we can do, we can crawl out of here, and we can just redo that rigging. So what we do, rig for sling load, and then you can just cancel the rigging or remove rigging, and you should just be able to re-rig it again. Let's try and find that center hook. The reason we use that center hook is for weight distribution. Let's say we had the crate.
I've got it.
There we go. Perfect.
It's tricky. Sneaky thing.
So the reason why we put it in the center is for distribution. If we connect it directly to the front or to the rear, the pilot's going to have difficulty in controlling the aircraft due to the weight that's putting that aircraft down, like off the center of gravity. So for example, I once had a Husky that was accidentally attached just to the front, and I couldn't pull back at all. So when I lifted, it just pulled me forwards. It was not fun. So that is slung to the center hook, which is nice and good. We cover the other methods, the other options in the sling load menu on the sling loading course. So that will teach you manual rigging as well as adjusting ropes and different types of slinging. So yes, that is basic sling loading. Well, finally we'll have a quick trip over to the KP crate filler. If you head to the teleport pole, there should be a teleport to it. Rightio, so just over at the terminal, this is our wonderful KP crate filler. I don't know why it's over here, but it is where it is. So what we do, we go ahead and ace interact with the crate, and then we'll see two options for KP crate filler. It doesn't matter which one you select. So then we have this wonderful window that comes up. In the top left, you can request a crate. So the only option in there is an empty pallet. In the top right, you can then select any crates that are nearby. Then below where we request a crate is equipment categories. So we've got weapons, magazines, then there's an empty one which is actually weapon attachments. Then we have grenades, explosive, others, which covers everything else, as in MREs, water, radios, GPSs, C-tabs, medical supplies, ID badges for crates, anything anything other. And then finally there is another option below others which you can't exactly see, but that is clothing. So what we'll do, Mr. Tuggins, if you can go ahead and request a crate for us.
Empty crate was provided.
Lovely. So if you can't see it in the top right, you should be able to press that refresh button, and you should be able to select empty pallet. There should be one 8 meters away.
Lovely, got it selected.
So hopefully, if this works, and it should work for you, I pray to God, because it's not working for me at the moment. But under the categories, under equipment, you can then select a category, and you should find some things. So let's say we look at weapons, there should just be a list.
Yep.
Hopefully. Lovely. However, if we go into magazines, there's then going to be another drop-down box below, which then you can select the weapon to find those magazines for.
Right. I see how that works.
And it's the same thing for attachments. So attachment selector, you can then select the attachment, well, the weapon you want those attachments for, and then it gives you a list of the attachments that we use that are for that weapon system.
Oh, lovely.
Mr. Smith, is it working for you?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I was confused by the magazines part, but I see now what you mean by selecting the actual weapon, and then that's actually really quick and easy in some ways.
It is much easier
than having to manually put them in. That must have been horrible.
Exactly, having to go through a list of how many magazines we use on all the different weapon systems. So yes, we can just select a weapon and then find the mags for it. Right, let's head back to the T area, and then we'll just spot aircraft. Over there's a thing. So yeah, we'll cover what we'll do. We'll repair, refuel, and then rearm. The reason why we do it in that order is because repair it, because otherwise there's no point pouring fuel in if there's a hole in the fuel tank, for example. So we repair first, then we refuel, because if we do need to go somewhere, we can go and do it. We're still an operational bird. We might have no ammunition though. So repair, refuel, and then finally rearm. What we prioritize parking on the right side of the airframe, so on the other side of the minigun. That is that side, left side when we're looking at it this way. And we approach from the rear. So we come up. I'll do a little drawing on the map. I'll draw a little Chinook, so it's sitting as it is now. We've got our minigun facing this side. So this is the front. I'll put the little jimpy on the rear too, maybe. There we go. Facing towards us as it is now. This is the rear. What we want to do, we want to approach from the rear of the airframe. We then want to park up the right side and sort of park in line with the front of the fuel. The Rearm, well, all the trucks that we use will fit under the rotors, so we don't have to worry about colliding with them. And so we can also do, for example, we can do a hot refuel, and we can park that fuel truck underneath the rotors while they are spinning. That's not an issue. Again, I'll remind you that we need to ask for permission when approaching the airframe from the pilot. So that's pretty much an informal conversation of, Wick, can I approach the airframe? Yes, sure. And that'll be it. So yeah, approach on the right. Might be a bit fun because you'll be sitting on the right in the repair and the refuel. So there's a more distance between where you're sitting in that truck and the airframe. So you might want a hand just to make sure that you're not getting too close or too far away from the airframe. And then so we'll pull the truck up along the right side, making sure we stop sort of in line where the sides of the Chinook stop, so where the sort of fuel tanks are. We'll then do our servicing, and then what we're going to do, we're not going to pull forward, we want to reverse back the way we came. The reverse away from the airframe back down that same side. And then we can park up. Lovely. Final thing, there is a limit of speed when you're around the airframe, and that's 10 kilometers an hour. So just keep it nice and slow so we don't have to worry about desync and etc. Lovely. Let's go ahead and get that Chinook fixed up.
Which one would you like to take, Smith?
If you do repair, can go
I'll
to
take the refuel then. I'll take the dangerous one.
the one that blew up.
Yeah, I can get barbecued.
That's the ammo truck. We want to start with the repair, don't we?
I was fooled.
It's okay, no one saw that.
So if he's still around a bit, I might come by and see what you're doing unless you've got other plans, but
You want me guiding you on this? Or are you good to go?
Oh, I got it. And so, repairing, that's going to be a little fun. There should be some repair kits in the back of there'll be some in the Chinook, and there'll also be some in the repair truck. So, if we don't have space in our backpack, don't worry, empty out some of the kit. If you can squeeze one in, then all is okay. And then what we're going to do, we're going to interact with the Chinook, and we should see repair and then full repair under those options. If you have a repair kit on you and there's a repair truck nearby. You might not, and there might be a reason, because you might not be set as an engineer. Let me sort that.
Yeah, I've got no dice on that one.
You do now.
Oh, there we go. Lovely. Oh, full
So
repair.
traits engineer. Yeah, so you'll see full repair in that menu.
Does it speed up if you have two people doing it, or is it?
Nope.
Oh,
No, it's just a one-man job. If we didn't have this repair truck here, what we'd have to do, we'll take our toolkits, we'll have to walk around the airframe and while trying to ace interact, and you'll see like different positions where you can interact with.
so like engines, front.
Exactly, engine, fuel tank, stuff like that. I'll just wait a minute for running to fuck off. I didn't say the other end, I don't think that counts. That's a bit of ambiance though, mate.
Not very much so.
If we can get a fucking ground taxi fast.
It's all about the ambiance.
leave them, it doesn't work in reverse. That is correct. Really quite frustrating at some points.
Moving. Pilot, permission to approach the airframe, please.
You should be able to shove it in wherever, it doesn't matter where.
There you go.
Love it.
I figured that looks most appropriate.
Yeah, in the fuel tank, you know, that'll do.
And it's just, is it just do automatically, or do you
It does it automatically,
Oh,
yeah.
lovely.
It will even come up with a prompt in the top left once it's done refueling.
1,385 litres.
1,921. Ooh, it's going down. Oh, I think that was it. Yep, fueling complete.
Okay.
Disconnecting. And return the fuel nozzle. Right, reversing out.
Lovely.
Vehicle, truck reversing. Vehicle, truck reversing.
Right, a bit more than you're good.
So rearming, pretty simple as well. Ace interact the truck. You'll see an option to take ammo. You can then select the airframe. You then have the options for 2 lots for the minigun. One of them's actually for the Jimpy, but they use both the U-762, so it thinks, yeah, Arma. And then finding the flares. Not expecting you to refill it completely. Just as long as you throw a couple boxes in, you understand that, yeah, there are 3 different types of ammunition, and yeah, that's about it.
Less.
Oh, you're so ever so kind. Do you lads have any questions?
Nope, no questions.
Any questions about the whole course? So yeah, I said an hour and a half, so an hour and 15 is not too bad. Right, thank you both for coming. You have now passed your defense technical training. I'll get the admin